what is fascinating and terrifying is to see how U.S. government and now Canadian government money and UK funds so-called fact checkers. For example, NewsGuard.
Yeah, fact checkers.
I don't know if you ever heard of NewsGuard. The huge contracts with the U.S. Air Force for some reason, and they review any website and give it a rating, and that rating is plugged into browsers, and it basically says this is safe and this is dangerous. And it's purely political. I mean, they rate us every year. It's a BS exercise. They ask us questions about Trump. They ask us questions about transgenderism, and they ask us questions about vaccines. You can see they're pushing a very particular message track, and they censor us for our opinions, not our facts. These things are all funded by the government.
Yeah, well, the thing is, if it was an easy thing to separate out opinion from fact, the world would be a much less complex place. You know, today's fact is tomorrow's opinion, and today's opinion is tomorrow's fact. And partly we're exchanging information all the time to distinguish between the two, but it's not like it's easy a priori. And so many preposterous things have turned out to be true. You know, I think the thing that shocked me most, two things that I discovered in the last 10 years, I suppose, were kind of at the top of the list of shocking realities. And one was that the public education system in North America and in Europe and in Japan, for that matter, was literally created by fascist industrialists in the late 1800s to make unthinking workers available for use in factories. They based the public education system on the Prussian military model, and the Prussians had decided they were going to train rural people to be soldiers, and the last thing they wanted them to do was think. And so that's like, I just don't even know what to do with a piece of information like that, but nothing's changed in 100. Well, that's why it's rows of desks and there's factory bells. And, you know, there was some reason for it. Rural people were pouring into the cities. Their kids were very likely to work in factories. You know, they had to learn to work by the bell. But the insistence that the products be unthinking, you know, because otherwise they wouldn't be suitable factory workers. First of all, that's a stupid theory, because you actually want your factory workers to think so they can see what's wrong on the line and help you work to continuously improve your industrial processes. The Japanese figured that out. So it was a stupid theory to begin with, but it's also dehumanizing. And, you know, that's still the ethos of the public school system. So that's appalling. And then the next bit of, you know, impossible conspiratorial reality that I uncovered was, not that I uncovered it, you know, globally, I don't mean that, but for my own edification, was that the food pyramid was formulated by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and it was a marketing ploy. And they knew that it was going to cause an epidemic of obesity and diabetes because their own experts told them that. It's like...
And those are, I don't even think those are particularly acute crises. Those are sort of long-standing problems that it's not, oh my God, we've got to snuff this idea out before this election, like the Hunter Biden laptop story.
That's a dreadful story.
So what you're talking about are big swaths of ideas.
Right. And then there's the crisis ideas like the ones you just described,
which are so throttled around elections.
The Hunter Biden laptop story, that's another one too. I talked to Miranda Devine. She broke that story for the New York Post. I've had her on as a guest twice. And that's another story that's just completely unbelievable. I mean, Hunter Biden dropped 3 laptops off. Not 1, 3. Now, the first question you might ask yourself is, how do you water soak 3 laptops? Right? 1, okay, you dropped it in the pool during your cocaine-fueled misery binge. But 3? And he did that a week before his father announced his run for presidency. And like a Freudian would sniff around that for about 15 years, and rightly so. And then there was a lot of damning material on there, which you think he might have thought about a little bit, unless he was out for revenge, let's say. And then, well, then the story broke, and then just a calamitous tsunami of absolute lies. They knocked the New York Post off of Twitter, and that's the oldest standing newspaper in North America.
I think Alexander Hamilton, I think.
Yeah, it's a bit tabloidy, and, you know, and nonetheless, it does some very good work, and certainly the work it did on the Hunter Biden laptop story was good. And then they called it Russian disinformation, and this is like weeks before the election. I truly believe that was enough to throw the election. Now, it turned out maybe that it was worse for the progressives that Trump had 4 years to think in what would you call exile, you know, because here he's back and he's been thinking for quite a while. But And then those intelligence agents signed that document that said it had all the earmarks of a Russian disinformation
That's such
campaign.
a funny phrase,
That's
isn't it?
for sure. You know how conniving and miserable and wretched and deceitful and traitorous you have to be to come up with a line like that? Yeah. It's like, well, we have to convince the American people that this is a hoax, but we know it isn't a hoax, so we have to walk the line very carefully. So if it comes back to bite us in the ass, we can say, well, it would just... All we said was that it had the hallmarks of a Russian disinformation campaign, not that it actually was one. Hint, hint, wink, wink, And Zuckerberg, I have some sympathy for Zuckerberg, actually. I've talked to him, and maybe I'm naive, and it's certainly possible, because I tend to give people the benefit of the doubt. But, 10 years ago, if the White House came knocking at your door and said, you're running a very complex operation here. We have reason to believe that it has been compromised. We'd like you to aid us in our investigations. You can think you would have been like free speech advocate number one and said no, but most people will back off their free speech with a lot less pressure than that. That's for sure. And Zuckerberg definitely made mistakes. And you could say that his admission of guilt, in the Trump era is self-serving. And I suppose you could, that's something to consider, but I'm not trying to excuse it or what happened on Twitter, which was way worse.
We only know what happened to Twitter because Elon Musk himself revealed it. He sort of opened up his own kimono to show the world. Yep. I've got to think it was the same at YouTube, Google, Facebook, Instagram. They just haven't been as forthcoming. Elon Musk is very unusual that way.
Yeah.
And what I find...
And there is misinformation and disinformation campaigns. It's not like TikTok isn't run by the Chinese communists, and it's warped a whole generation of young women because that's where they get all their information. Yeah. And 18 to 35-year-old young women in the United States have political views that are way out of alignment with everyone else's, hyper-progressive and liberal. And there's absolutely no doubt that the Chinese communists are fomenting discord using TikTok. Obviously, clearly, in a documented way.
And they're tracking too, because today's 15-year-old, in 5 years, he'll be 20. And maybe he'll be a soldier then. And maybe at 25, maybe he'll be think of if you're tracking someone and all their conversations and all their networks and all their friends, and if everything they say is being recorded from their gestures to, and if it's all being backed up in big data in Beijing, you're talking to a kid today, but in 20 years from now, you've got some dirt on someone.
Yeah.
And I mean, TikTok is so addictive. Elon Musk said the algorithm, he felt it pulling on his mind. He had to shut it down. It's an amazing algorithm. It knows what you like almost more than you do. And that's what makes it so...
more, certainly explicitly more than you do, definitely.
And the thing is...
People won't admit to what they like.
And not just that, maybe you forgot what you said in that phone call 5 years ago. How can it forget? It never forgets anything in some ways. Yeah. And there is some reason to be terrified about it. But I think Donald Trump has decided if there's going to be AI, let it be in America rather than in China.
Well, that's Musk's take on it too, is that, this is a dreadful war, this AI war, because these AI systems use reinforcement learning, and that's how biological systems learn. They're very lifelike, very, very lifelike, and their intelligence is limited only by their database and the amount of power at the moment that's available. Computational ability, power, and the database. And those are just growing like mad. And so, it's clearly the case that these systems, well, in some ways, without AI, advertisers, the successful ones, knew more about your preferences than you did. But with AI, well, that's a whole different ballgame, especially when they're starting to do things like analyze your eye movements, because eye movements are very, very indicative of attentional focus. Right? They're almost a perfect window into the soul, which is why we look at each other's eyes when we talk. Right? So these cameras on your phones can track your eyes with no problem. Well, and then the AI systems will know more about what motivates each of us and all of us than we will. They probably already do. So So Musk's take on that is, well, better him than the Chinese. If it has to be someone, and it seems like it has to be, because what are you going to stop AI? Good luck. There's no stopping it. Yeah. There's not even hypothetically a way to stop it, because you can't even define it really. Like, what are you going to do? Make the mathematics illegal? That's all statistics, by the way. So that's gone. No, that's not going to happen.